Hey folks, hey folks, hey folks, hey folks. All right, let me get into some of your questions. I'm going to jump into things today. Really interesting week that we have had here. Let me start with a bunch of questions and try and pull them together. I'm still hearing people say there is no sound, but it might be that we haven't caught up because it now says that my mic is working fine. So we got sound. Let me know. Still saying no sound. Well, I don't know what else to do. So now I'm hearing that we got the sound. Okay. You didn't really miss anything before except me saying that I like Lubbock, Texas, and that the day will maybe come when I think it would be so much fun. Maybe, you know what? Maybe if I do more of these things, I'm trying to write this book, but maybe if I do more of these things, it might be fun to do one town a day and say, this is why Lubbock is cool. And this is why Indianapolis is cool. And anyway, all right. It's been quite a week. And I guess, every week is going to be like this. The questions that you asked were not surprising at all. Let's start with what happened last night when the Trump administration put pressure on ABC to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel. And it's important. So this is interesting to me because I don't actually watch TV. I don't have time. I have no objection to TV. I'd actually quite like to sit and watch it, but I don't have time. So I had never seen a Jimmy Kimmel monologue. I just read the stories about why he had been suspended, not canceled, but suspended. And so I sat and watched the monologues in question. And what really jumps out to you is exactly what has been true this whole week about the use by the radical right of alleged commentary about Charlie Kirk to try and shut up voices that are critical of President Trump and the administration. And this has seemed to me very clear. If you haven't seen a Jimmy Kimmel monologue, you can go on YouTube and you can watch them. And they are just skewering President Trump and the administration. And crucially, Kimmel, according to what I read, Kimmel is attracting viewers in a younger demographic than somebody like Stephen Colbert, who also got pushed out of his slot on CBS. Trump had said back in July that after getting rid of Colbert, he was planning to go after Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon and Seth. Don't know. I don't watch TV. Sorry. I can see him. Seth. Help me out. Seth. Anyway, maybe you know who that is. I should look it up. Anyway, he had said that back in July that he was going to get rid of these guys. And then, of course, his Federal Communications Commission leader, Brendan Carr, who was in the past allegedly in favor of free speech when it was a question of getting right-wing speech platformed in places where it had been excluded, went ahead and pressured the entities that manage ABC to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel. And this absolutely blew up because it is a direct assault on the First Amendment to the Constitution. So you remember the Constitution is finished in 1787, 1789. I can't ever remember, 1787, I guess. And it creates this really strong government compared to what had been there in place before that, the Articles of Confederation, which were just states that came together in what they call the League of Friendship. they're going to tear each other apart. They're going to tear the country apart within a very short span of time. So the framers decide to get together and write a new national government. And they create this strong national government. I just did a video about it. It's on my YouTube channel, and it's also on Instagram if you're interested in how and why they did it. But it created a strong enough government, even with the checks and balances in it, that a number of people who were very concerned about the rise of a dictator said, we ain't going near this sucker unless you make it very clear that we have protections from the government intruding on citizens' civil liberties. So the Congress, once the Congress starts to sit, they write 10 amendments. They actually write 12, but they create 10 amendments to the Constitution. And those first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which Congress votes on and passes, and then the states ratify, are called the Bill of Rights. That's the difference between the two. There's the Articles of Confederation that don't work. Then there's the Constitution, which creates a very strong government. And a lot of people are like, whoopsie, we're not so keen on that because it looks too strong. We won't have anything to do with it unless you make sure it's written in the law of the land that we have certain protections. Those first 10 amendments to the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. 10 amendments. I'll tell you more about them in a second. And crucially, those first 10 amendments all restrict the power of the federal government. That's I did this last Tuesday too, and I was like, it pushes back the federal government. And I know that's probably annoying to watch me do that at this point, but that is literally when I think of them, that's how I think of them, that they are pushing back the federal government. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an aside here. Those first 10 amendments limit the power of the federal government. The 13th, 14th, and 15th increase the power of the federal government. That's one of the reasons that there was such an outcry among Confederates about the 13th, 14th, and 15th, is because those increase the power of the federal government. And as late as the Eisenhower administration, there were reactionaries who still were pissed off about the 13th, 14th, and 15th. There's stuff in the Eisenhower papers about that. Anyway, when they wrote the First Amendment to the Constitution, the First Amendment, they put in it the pieces of the rights that citizens would require to push back against their government. So first of all, they said, don't even think about coming at us with any kind of an established religion. I paraphrase, that's not the way they said it, but you get the point. You cannot establish a religion. You cannot intrude on our speech. The federal government cannot intrude on speech. It also can't intrude on the right of the press, and there are some other rights, the right of assembly, the right to petition your government when you're mad about something it does. All those things are in there. But for our purposes today, what is central to that First Amendment to the Constitution, it's the first one they talk about, is that you have the right to speak without the government punishing you for it. Now, I read something interesting about a dictator who used to say, you have the right to say anything you want, and we have the right to punish you for it. It's a really big difference between, theoretically, the federal government or the government can't do anything if we criticize it. That's our right to criticize the government. It's right there in the First Amendment. The administration used the power of the government by threatening to withhold broadcast licenses and other federal benefits for regulatory benefits for the parent companies of, including Disney, by the way, of ABC, in order to get a critic of the administration pulled off the air. That's just, I can't even to express to you how big a deal that is. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second. All right. So that's what happened last night. And keep that in your mind, because a lot of the other questions that you asked, I'm going to tie into that. So people are frightened about this and they're upset about this, and they should be. This is a really big deal. And the thing that has come from that, from all the craziness over the past week, and I'm going to try and tie in your questions here, is a lot of people are really angry and really frightened by where we are. And I'm going to ask you to usually I just like answer your questions, but I'd like to put them in a bigger framework today. Because what Donald Trump, especially, but now the MAGA Republicans are doing is they're trying to divide the American people into friends and enemies, which is something that happens in any society. I guess I shouldn't say any because I'm an Americanist. It certainly has happened in America before without there being explicitly, I think, an ideological component to that. But it is also something that political theorists have always said benefited the rise of a dictator. So nowadays, on the radical right, people are reading a guy named Eric Schmidt, who was a political philosopher who became a Nazi. And he talks a lot about this division of the world into friends and enemies and the use of the state to hurt your enemies. Now, Trump's working really, really hard to make it seem as if the people who support Trump are the good guys, they're the friends, and everybody else is the enemies. And he did this in his first term by weaponizing the use of the word Democrat. So if you think about the way he reacted to the people who were working for the FBI and the Department of Justice, who were investigating his own administration for, I'm sorry, his campaign, his 2016 campaign for its ties to Russian operatives, they were all Republicans. I mean, he'd even appointed some of them. But he called them Democrats. When they started to work against him, he called them Democrats. And, at one point, James Comey, who was the director of the FBI, who was a Republican, actually talked about that and said, this is not the party that I signed up for. And if you remember in the first impeachment case, one Republican, and that was Mitt Romney of Utah, a Republican senator of Utah, voted to convict Trump on one count. And Trump promptly said that he was secretly working for the Democrats and that he was trying to infiltrate Trump's Republican administration and that he was actually helping the Democrats, which is very difficult to get your head around when you remember that Romney was actually the Republican Party's nominee for president in 2012, less than 10 years before all this transpired. So the idea that he was somehow a secret plant by the Democrats in the Republican Party is, bonkers, right? But you can see this attempt to divide the country in two, the way he has been doing it, really taking off now. He's always done this, but really after the murder of Charlie Kirk, I think just about a week ago, there's been this litmus test that you have to not simply disavow violence, which virtually everybody has. There's always fringe people one place or another, but there's been a real outcry of this is not the way we want our country to go. But to lionize Kirk in ways that simply aren't true. I mean, as people point out, they're not actually using Kirk's words when they talk about how wonderful he is, because he was actually, a real agitator and rabble rouser, and that's just who he was, So there is this increasing attempt to make this a litmus test. You have to be on our side, and they're going to take anything that they can spin as being offensive in order to create that other group. And you see this, I think, with the Kimmel monologue, which I listened to. I did all his monologues, in which he actually didn't say anything about Kirk, except a couple times to say how heinous the murder was. So, but what he really does is he says they're milking this for all it's worth. And then in those monologues, he skewers the president. I mean, he just skewers the president. Like I say, it's interesting to have watched this for me to have watched it, because I had never, I must have seen Kimmel at some point, but I'd certainly never seen his TV show. So it's kind of like what we call in my profession, the intelligent Martian, where you're like, you don't know the inside jokes, you don't know any of that stuff. So what is your impression? And and mine was a pretty honest, this is really about the way he's talking about the president. So they're working really hard to do that, to create an us and a them, and then to use the power of the state against the them, against the enemies. It seems really pretty clear. And you saw last night that Trump posted on social media, or his account did. And I think it's going to be important to remember going forward that he is not always in charge of his account. There's other people who post on there. And so people are often writing Trump said this, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But it's more accurate to say his social media account said this. And his social media account said that he was going to designate, I have it right here. No, I don't. He was going to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization. And Antifa is a word that means anti-fascist. And he has claimed since his first term that it is an organized group that is essentially standing against him. And he says standing against law and order. Although Antifa, according to his own FBI director in 2020, is just an ideology of people saying, we don't like fascists. They're anti-fascists, and there's no group, there's no, secret pinky swear or anything. So, and it's also not at all clear he can make that kind of a designation. But the idea is to say anybody who disagrees with me is one of them. And us good guys all have to stay together. But there's something really interesting in that in this moment. And that's that, think about it. There isn't an us versus them. Trump isn't an us. Trump is an I. It's not like you can say, hey, there's these two contending groups and they want different things and all that. That's not the case here. Trump is one guy who demands absolute loyalty to himself, who is using the government for his own benefit and that of his family and his cronies. And there's all those cartoons about how, the new guy comes in like a toy and he's the best guy. And then, he ends up getting thrown under the bus and then he's moved off stage. The other piece of that is that this construction of us versus them is not true on the Trump side, but it's also not true on the anti-Trump side, which I think is one of the things that has frustrated so many people, is they keep waiting for someone to take over and someone to organize things and someone to push back against them. But there isn't a them. There's a Trump and Trump loyalists, and then there's all the rest of us. And I would like to argue today, and maybe it's just because I spent so much time in the last 3 days with the Constitution, that's actually incredibly American. And it's actually incredibly powerful because, in fact, the United States of America is a really big country. And one of the things that Americans don't like, and that is part of their birthright, is they don't like to be told what to do. And they're not, we're very much joiners. That's something all the way back to Tocqueville used to talk about. As Americans like groups, they like to hang out with their friends, but they're not big, let's all do this as a country kind of people. They're much more individualistic. And so in this moment, think about what's happening. You have a number of different ways that people are pushing back. And I'm sorry, I promised I would say something at the beginning of this, and I forgot because I got screwed up with the technology here. One of the things you could do at this very moment, if you are in Hollywood, is you can go join a protest at El Capitan in Hollywood in support of free speech and Jimmy Kimmel at 4:30 Pacific time. That's not something that means much to somebody from Maine, but there you go. There's one thing you can do. Another thing that somebody suggested, that didn't ask me to advertise, but I will, is there are organizations all over the country now that are, I love this, that are urban sketching organizations. You go and you sketch an urban scene, and you don't have to be an artist. They say there's no need to worry about your skill level. It's a kind of way to do a flash mob that calls attention to the beauty of our cities and the people in them, but that creates new ways of looking at organizations and new ways of meeting people. And there's also, of course, the thing that I keep plugging is the overpass brigades, the visibility brigades, and the card campaign that I advertise on my Facebook posts. But there are a lot of those. One of the organizations I did the other day in Georgia does a similar thing to the card campaign, except it's tailored specifically to issues in Georgia. And they simply take a full sheet of paper and fold it into a little booklet. So you think about the many different ways in which people are pushing back against Trump. And I'm just going to start listing some of the ways here. You have, of course, the lawsuits, and you have people calling their members of Congress and working at the state level and the local level to push back against the Trump administration. But you also have boycotts. And a lot of people have looked for a national strike. And I have never really supported a national strike because, as a historian, I know that in the past, national strikes tend to backfire against the people making them because they are too general and they end up hurting people who don't understand what's going on and feel that they turn against the people organizing the strikes. But boy, do targeted boycotts work. Take a look at what happened to Tesla. Right now, it's not clear what's going to happen with Jimmy Kimmel, in part because people are madly canceling their Disney Channel. And there's a whole list of people companies associated with ABC News and Disney. I'm sorry, not ABC News, with the ABC channel and Disney that are really truly vulnerable to people saying, okay, you don't want us to participate? We're out of here. You have, I'm looking at some of these. You have in a number of both national and local levels, and I love this. You have local town meetings, for example, issuing resolutions against the Trump administration, complaining about what they've done, calling them out for things, which I love. Just today, you've had lawmakers arrested in New York City because they weren't allowed in to examine the conditions under which ICE was holding detainees. My point here is that one of the things that I think we're seeing is a lot of Americans protesting this administration in their own way, whichever feels the most frustrating and the most dangerous to them. And that's not a weakness, that's an extraordinary strength, because it's extremely difficult to bear down on 341 million people all protesting in different ways. And so before people get yeah, I'm sorry, somebody just it's hard for me to watch this. Somebody just asked if I would talk about what happened under Newt Gingrich and his political action committee, calling for the people in the Republican Party to talk about Republicans with words like strong and patriotic and wealthy, and using really strong positive words, and Democrats with really strong negative words, weak, appeasement, traitor. And that very, very clearly was part of this attempt to create this idea that's deep in the Republican Party now, that Democrats are illegitimate and have no right to govern. So that's been part of it. But so if you look at this moment and you look at somebody just said nature journaling to meet other people and to get out in public areas. And I'm going to add a bunch more of these, but I want to set up this theory first, this ideological stance. If you stop thinking about the country as us versus them and start thinking about it as the American people versus an autocrat, the lens changes a lot, doesn't it? And one of the reasons that I've been thinking about this is not only because of the smart people I talk to, but because you know who came out against the firing of Jimmy Kimmel last night? I didn't believe it was real. I actually went and made sure from a lot of sources it was real. Tucker Carlson. And when Tucker Carlson, who was a right-wing broadcaster, talked about why free speech is important, damned if he didn't echo James Madison, which says that, I keep saying this to you, that at the end of this, whatever is coming, the political alliances are not going to be what we expect them to be. And if you disagree with that, look at the fact that two of the other people who have stood up in the last week against Trump is John Yoo, who was the guy who wrote the torture memo for the Bush administration saying they could go ahead and torture people no matter what Congress said. And Karl Rove, who was one of the Republican gurus who put this Republican Party in power. You're starting to see people standing up against this regime from places you do not expect them to stand up. And as an example of where this might go, I would like to point out to you that one of the people standing most strongly for the rights of Americans, including a very recent social media post about the rights of transgender Americans, is Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol, who was a neocon, a neoconservative. We are rethinking our partisanship in this moment around our defense of democracy. And if you think about it that way, and you stop thinking, oh, Trump's got all this power, and then we're the weenies over here, and start thinking about it as what America has always done really well is we the people defending our rights against some upstart who wants to take them away. So try and reframe it that way. And let me push you a little bit further on that. Unfortunately, I didn't turn the light on. It's quite dark in here. So a number of questions here that I'm going to tie into this. Somebody said, how on earth can you say that this administration is weak when they hold all the cards? First of all, this administration is enormously unpopular. A new study out, I think it was today, by The Economist, hardly a left-wing publication. It tends to slide right, shows that Trump has negative 17 points. He is underwater by 17 points. And it also shows that his popularity has gone whoop over the last last week or so. He's down real fast, and that's before the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. His popularity is extraordinarily low. And why does that matter? It matters because the American people are not behind what is happening with the administration. And he is underwater on every single issue, including the economy and deportations, which were the two things he won election on. So there is that, the fact that he is unpopular, but you can also tell they know he is unpopular by how hard they are trying to crack down. They are trying to look strong because they do not have control. And again, one of the things I was thinking of when I was thinking about this today and about what I'm talking about, we the people versus a regime. Imagine a room full of fourth graders. Those of you who've had children or have been in education, if you really are in control of your classroom, you don't have to yell. You don't have to, maybe you have to raise your voice sometimes, but you got the guardrails, right? And the students know how to behave, and they tend to behave. If you don't have control of a fourth grade classroom and they're running around like rabbits, there's no way you're going to reclaim control over them. And what often happens is a teacher who cannot control that classroom screams more and more and more and louder and louder and louder. And all it does is it makes the students, some of the students cower, sure, but the rest of them laugh and they turn worse. And all of you know that dynamic. If you haven't had to be in charge of a classroom like that or had a child in a classroom like that, we were in classrooms like that as kids, right? Think about it that way. They're trying to crack down so hard because they know they are losing control of the American people. They're also losing control of Trump's ability to handle the presidency. Watch him. Watch the fact that he was just in the UK, and Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, held his hand a lot. She is famous for not touching him. It looked as if he was having trouble. He needed to have somebody holding his hand. He's having trouble articulating things. He's not remembering faces. He is in increasingly poor shape. And it increasingly looks as if the power of the administration is flowing to Russell Vogt at the Office of Management and Budget, who is a key writer of Project 2025, and Stephen Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff, who is behind the immigration policies and increasingly, seemingly other stuff as well. They don't have, and they're not elected officials, and they're trying to do as much as they possibly can, or seem to be trying as much to do as much as they possibly can, while he is still in charge of the government. There is also the fact that you can see how things are falling apart over the Epstein files. And those are going to be really important not to forget about, because the Epstein files are not just about the sexual abuse and assault of children, but they are also about the reality that wealthy, connected people got away with breaking the law and really badly hurting other Americans, other people. They weren't all Americans, by the way. Some of the girls came from former Soviet republics and some from Russia as well. Um, I'm sorry, Russia is a former Soviet republic. That my mind was elsewhere. That larger story that rich guys can break the law with impunity is really, after all, why we're here right now, right? Why we're in this moment when people are really angry and they're really frustrated is because everything seems to be stacked for a few rich guys. And that Epstein story and the teeth of it was clear yesterday on the on the Hill in Washington, when FBI Director Kash Patel just exploded whenever anybody asked him about Epstein and the Epstein investigation. And when he was repeatedly asked if Trump is in those files, he would change the subject. He would not answer that. And we actually know from a Wall Street Journal article that in fact he is in the Epstein files. So there is that weakness. There is also the pending trouble in the economy, which you can see building at this point, and which is about to be in everybody's faces, not just with inflation, which you're already seeing. And I just keep mentioning the cost of coffee. If you've looked at it, it's like eye-popping. But also, we are entering the fall period when the new cost of health insurance on the affordable health care markets is going to go up, and it's pretty dramatically going to go up unless in some fashion Congress manages to fix the mistakes and the abuses in the budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans passed with no Democratic votes in July. And so those things are not going to help the Trump administration's standing. And the key here is, one of the things that's really interesting is, right now, I just today did an interview with Senator Adam Schiff of California. It's available right now, I think, on Substack, but we'll post it over here too, and we'll post it on, I guess, pieces of it on Instagram. And just so you know, if you want to watch the videos I do on Substack, and I'm not great about tying the technology. I'm good at each one of the technologies, but I'm not good at tying them. You can subscribe to my Substack don't put in a credit card. It's free. I mean, they will ask, Substack always asks you for money, but it's free. You don't have to put that in, and you can watch all that stuff if you want to watch it live as well. And I'm doing a bunch more of those coming up. So anyway, I did an interview with him, and I asked him why the Republican senators are not standing up, because that's really shocking to me. And what he said is that they are either cowards or they are interested in protecting their power in the future. They think that this is what is going to keep them in power, is to kowtow to Trump. And what I would like to suggest to you is, what we need to impress upon them is the people who are going to be in power in the future are those people who stand against Trump. And quite frankly, this is one of the things that astonishes me. And I've been watching for a Republican to come out and take a stand, because this is quite literally how Teddy Roosevelt got his start. He stood against the people in his own party. And that's what catapulted him to the kind of prominence he ended up with and eventually to the White House. And that's waiting. It's the brass ring around the carousel waiting to be caught for a Republican who will do that. And you're starting to see the cracks in places like Georgia, where the former lieutenant governor who stood against Trump's attempt to steal the more than 11,000 votes in Georgia to give him the win of that state's electoral votes in 2020, has switched parties and is running for office as a Democrat now. And that the idea of putting enough pressure on the political system that people will look at what's happening around them and say, hey, if I want to win, what I really need to do is I need to stand with all these Americans from all these parties who are standing on American values. And that's what's going to get me elected. And that's far more important than trying to court these MAGAs who are quite rapidly turning against Trump for all the reasons that I just enumerated. So how are we going to do that in this time when everybody is frightened and worried about what's going to happen? First of all the things that I just talked about. But here's one of the things I would encourage you to do. Make sure that you have figured out ahead of time communication channels in case the very wealthy tech giants who run channels like Facebook, Substack, TikTok, X, I mean, X is already lost, any of the places where people are congregating, make sure you've got your feet elsewhere as well. Because look at what happened to Twitter. Twitter was a great place to hang out, and then Elon Musk bought it, turned it into X, and now it's a swamp. It's a Nazi swamp. And you want to have ahead of time your communication channels open so that if in fact something happens and you need to jump ship in a hurry, you have a place to go, which is what happened with Blue Sky. Lots of us had opened accounts in a lot of different places, and we're sort of there half-heartedly until X went under instantly for people like me, and we all just jumped to Blue Sky, and now it's a thing. Make sure you got your feet in more than one place, and make sure that you feel like you are able to stay in touch with people you care about. And that may mean now reaching out to people that you might have met online or whatever through messaging and saying, hey, I'd like to stay in touch with you, and obviously not in a creepy way, but I'm over here on this website. I'm over here. Here's my handle, so that you can keep those communications intact if something happens to the one that is your thing of choice. Also, I would urge you to support independent media. And I don't mean financially if that is not possible. And I'm certainly not asking it for me. People are making a lot of noise about how the corporate media is falling down on the job. In many ways, that's true, although they're very good reporters at all of the usual outlets. But the independent media is really quite strong, and they're doing really terrific work. And they need your eyeballs, they need your shares, they need you to do clips of them and to share them, and to make sure that you are part of this web that is creating pushback against a regime. To that end, I would also, now I am going to make a beg here. My team and I are working really hard to create short videos about American history, just about American history. And we are trying to get out there into the social media space before Trump's people in the Heritage Society and all those Heritage Foundation and all those people start flooding the zone with crap. And to the degree you are willing to watch these videos and share them so that they're there and that people see them, the more we get that out there ahead of time, the better off we'll be. Do that for everybody. You see people you like, share them. Now, we've talked about this whole idea of sharing the idea of we are America. Let's do it. Let's figure out how to use our phones and to put videos out there that flood the zone. I don't know if you've noticed this, but Facebook at least is serving up to me crazy right-wing stuff since the murder of Charlie Kirk. Crap, stuff you know is not true. Bob Dylan did not mourn Charlie Kirk's death. That's simply an attempt to get old people to recognize who Charlie Kirk was and to think he was important. And that all that crap you're seeing, that's all propaganda. Flood the zone with good stuff, with solid stuff. One of the things that I've seen today on Blue Sky is people talking about their people who fought in World War II, just saying they would be rolling in their graves and saying, my father was in Patton's army. My, and with pictures. And I love that. I shared so many of those. Blue Sky made me stop sharing for a while. Figure out ways to take up space in this moment and to be ungovernable, because nonviolently, of course, and legally, but that's at the end of the day what will force an administration to recognize it is not in control. And the context for this, of course, for me, having just spent so much time lately with the revolution and with the Constitution, is this is literally what the people who established the United States of America did, is they made themselves ungovernable. And it is literally what enslaved Americans did during the Civil War. They made themselves ungovernable. And those things force a regime to break. And the good news about that is what I'm urging you to do is do things you love, do them with people you love. And to that end, a number of people have asked me how I stay sane and how they can stay sane through all this. And I would urge you to do the sorts of things I'm talking about with people in public to the degree you can. Stop doom scrolling, and which is a thing, believe me, I'm prone to it. And to one of the things that I do, you ask me how I stay sane, I try and learn new things, even if it's just little things that make me happy. Last night, this is really dumb. Last night, I learned how to candy pecans because I wanted to try this new salad that had candied pecans. My time investment was 5 minutes, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of water, a cup of pecans, and I felt good about it because I learned something. Sometimes I switch languages when I'm reading something to a different language that I know a little, and I pick up a few new words. That's a really good way to feed your brain and to remind you that it is still yours, no matter what somebody else is trying to tell you. So that's another good way to resist. I think that's everything that I had here, except, again, to say, I know it's a scary time, and yet to the degree you can think about this as we the people, making really strange bedfellows. I did not expect, as I will do tonight, that I am going to compare Tucker Carlson's words to James Madison's. That, if you had put that on a bingo card, I would have cried laughing. And yet here we are. We're in this moment where we, the people, are recognizing that the enemy is not that other that we've been set up to believe is the problem, but rather a regime that is trying to take away the rights of we, the people. And that gives us all these new possibilities, all these new ways to think about allegiances, all these new organizations to belong to, all these new ways to use art and music to push back against a regime that is trying to take those things away from us. So as frightening as this is, we have a blueprint now. We know that we have to come together to fight back against those who are trying to destroy our democracy. It's crystal clear now. And if the people who are still supporting this regime, they're never going to see the light. But if people like Tucker Carlson and John Yoo and Karl Rove, and I could keep on going down that list, are saying, hey, we got to do something here, the momentum is shifting. And the more they try and crack down, the more you recognize that they feel they have to because it is getting away from them. All right, I hope that makes people more optimistic. And as I say, get out there and do something, do anything. Do something that brings you joy and that makes connections with other people and that helps people to remember that we are a community that needs to protect each other and needs to work together, and that we have done that in the past in extraordinarily successful ways. And if we have to, we can do it again. Thank you for being here. I'm going back to writing, which is what I love to do. And guess we'll have more of tonight's salad with candied pecans. Thank you for being here.